Names in CenterPoint are individuals or organizations that you do business with. They can be vendors, customers, employees, or a combination of those. A list of names is maintained underneath Setup, Names, and Names. To create a new name from the Name Setup screen, you could click the New button. It'll take you to a name setup detail. The only required piece of information on this detail is the name itself. So as you can see, I can hit save and it'll add that to the names list. Okay, the additional fields give you additional features within CenterPoint. You can also create a name from a transaction screen. I'm going to bring up a payment screen, which would be where I would need a new vendor. And if I need a new one, I could click on the lookup and click the new button to create a new vendor, or I could right click and choose new. And this is going to be true of all of your transaction screens, whether it's a vendor or a customer. I'm going to edit an existing name and talk about these tabs and the information that are on these tabs. When entering in a new vendor, you'll select a name format. The name format controls how this line that is labeled company is formatted. If it's a business, it'll say company and there'll be a single field for you to enter in the company name. And if you put in a federal tax ID on tax forms that are printed, such as the 1099, it'll be formatted as an FEIN number. If it is an individual, that field will say last name, suffix, first name, middle initial, and any tax ID will be formatted on tax forms as a social security number. To the right of that, you're going to choose what type of a name this is. Is it a customer? Is it a vendor, purchaser, an employee, or a salesperson? The purchaser would require the purchase orders module, and the salesperson is really only used in our advanced AR module. So I've marked that this one is both a customer and a vendor, and next to each one of those is a detail button. If I click on that detail button, I can set up some default terms for this customer. So these are terms that are going to be assigned to new invoices for them by default, and I can assign a default accounts receivable account for that customer. For both of those, I actually don't need to assign a default accounts receivable account if I have set up a default in preferences. The system will use the default from preferences unless I've put something else in on the name itself. But for both of these fields, if I want to, I can make a selection and then right click and set it as the default. And that way I don't have to fill that in the next time I create another new name. I have similar features for the vendor selection. So this particular name is both a customer and a vendor, but as a vendor, I have some different terms that they assign to me as their customer. And I also have identified the default accounts payable account. Again, the accounts payable account can be identified in preferences. And if it's identified in preferences, I don't need to select an account here unless it's different. I can also place a vendor's payments on hold. If I do that, I can still enter in invoices for that vendor, but I can't make any payments to them until I take that check mark off of hold. From there, I can tab down to the abbreviation field. Abbreviations are optional, but if I'm going to use them, I might want to right-click on the field and manage how to handle duplicates. Do I want to allow duplicates, warn if duplicated, or no duplicates allowed? I can assign a name to a group, which will allow me some additional filtering capability when running a report. It allows me to grab all of the names that are part of that group at one time. Again, it's optional. If you have created names or groups, you can select which group you want or click new on the lookup to create a new group. You'll need to give the vendor or customer a name, whether it be a company name or an individual. If there's a contact there, you can identify who the contact is, and then put in the address. When entering in the address, it's going to ask you for the zip code first. Selecting the zip code does take and fill in the city and state automatically for you. Next to the address is some contact information for that address. I have, or communications methods for that address. I have a phone, a cell phone, a fax, and an email that can be entered in. Again, there is a tax ID field down in the tax information section, which is used when for vendors that you need to produce a 1099 for. There is a place for a state tax ID. And then there's also a place for a memo field. For this one, when I write a check to this vendor, they want to have the account number assigned to my company on the check. So by putting it in here, it'll show up on that form each time. There's the same type of thing for customers. If you have something in the memo field, you can have the memo appear on the invoice by default. This is just another place to assign the vendor terms. We did that because some people who have payroll only don't have access to the vendor detail button. There are many ways when you're paying a vendor to pay them. You could pay them with an electronic check. You could pay them with a manual check. You can pay them via an EFT or an ACH transaction. And each one of those transactions would probably have a different sequence number that you would create in CenterPoint for those. So here we can identify what sequence number should be used for payments made to this vendor by default. So I've chosen my computerized checks, but you could choose whatever sequence you want to default when you select that vendor. If you need to issue a 1099 to a vendor, you can mark to issue a 1099 to them. And we integrate with a product called Atrix that does allow you to send an electronic only version of a 1099 to a vendor. To receive an electronic only version, though, they do need to sign a consent. Otherwise, you're obligated to send them a printed copy. So if they do sign a consent that they are willing to receive an electronic only, then you can check this box and then put in the email address that they want that to go to. If you've already entered in an email address on one of your addresses, they'll be provided in the drop-down list, and you can select from those emails. I'm going to unmark those because this is not a 1099 vendor. In the bottom right-hand corner of the screen is an active status button, and that would allow us to make this vendor active or inactive for multiple companies or funds. If you're using our fund accounting product where it says companies, that would be equal to your funds. So by taking the check mark out, I've made it inactive for this company, but it is active for CenterPoint Farm. Under the Options button, you can set tab stops on this screen. So as you're tabbing through the different fields, if you want to skip a field, you can take it out of the sequence by removing the check mark for that field. At the bottom of the screen are two buttons that allow you to attach documents to this vendor or customer record. There is a separate video on file attachments that I do recommend that you review to learn how to attach documents to this vendor or customer record. Next to that is an additional notes button. You notice that mine was yellow already, and that means that there was notes in there. Otherwise, it would just be grayish color. When the notes are in there, for each note that you do put in there, actually you can put a timestamp in by just taking and clicking on the stamp button, and then you could type whatever notes you want to in here. It's a free format type of field where I can, just really keep typing and adding onto it as time goes on. If you type in notes that you want to be printed on any forms, you can click the Print Notes on Forms box, and then it will allow you to print the notes on your forms. However, that form might need to be edited to add the notes field to that form using the Forms Designer. I'm going to move over to the Addresses tab. You can create new addresses or multiple addresses for the same name without having to create a new name. Just by clicking the New button here, it'll add a new address. For each new address, you need to identify a location type. And so we have a billing address, shipping address, or home address. If you need a new location type, You can click New to create one. You do need to identify a address name. Like this one was called business address by default, but I might call this main office or something like that. I can change the name of it. And then you'll have a place for a contact name at each address and the address of that address. Okay, for each address, you can determine whether or not you want to print the contact information on any of the forms that you print, such as invoices or checks. And if later on this address is no longer an address you want to use for that vendor or customer, you can take the check mark out of active. One address can be marked for each of these different functions. Any one that's marked as the default billing address will be the address that any invoices or billing statements are sent to. The one marked as the default business address will be the one that shows up on your general tab. The one that's marked as the default shipping address will be the one that invoices that is marked is selected by default as the shipping address when on any new invoices you create for that customer. And the one marked as the default pay to address will be the one that comes up by default when you select that vendor on a payment screen. Okay, so this first address for me is the default address for all of these functions, except the Red Wing one I want to be the default shipping address. So as soon as I mark this one as the default shipping, it unmarks the one that was previously marked. Okay, so this one at the top is no longer the default shipping. The one that's the default shipping is the Red Wing address. Each address has its own communication methods, so it has its own list of telephone numbers and email addresses. You can see this address has one telephone number, but this address up here has a different telephone number and email address. If you need to add more communication methods, you can by clicking on the Communications Method button and clicking New to add another additional communications method. Likewise, each address can have separate notes. So maybe you don't want the notes under the additional notes button down here, but instead you want to put in address notes. So you can select the address notes and put in notes for the address. And that may be the note that you want to print on forms rather than the note that is for the entire vendor or customer. Okay, I'm going to move to the credit cards tabs. This is more for customers. If you are allowing your customers to pay by credit card and you want to keep their credit card information on file, you can enter it in here just as a reference point for that credit card. All you have to do is click New and then fill out the information on the right to add a new credit card. The Customs Names field is a tab that allows you to have or create your own fields of information about these names that you want to keep that we don't already have a field for. So one of the things that I wanted was the ability to put in what my user ID and password is for these vendors' websites. Each one of them requires me to create a user ID and password for it, and it's often different. So I wanted a place to store them. So I created new custom fields by clicking on the Custom Fields button and then clicking New. I gave it an abbreviation and a name, and I told the system what kind of a field it is. Is it going to contain date information, numeric, percentage, or text information? And the ones I set up were all text information. Okay, now I've got a place on each one of my names where I can enter in that information. So that takes us through the setup of these names. The additional tabs for email print and ACH payments are discussed in videos that are related to the features that use those functions.